Hey, it's Styles from Brand Content Studios. Here's your Content Marketing Quickie for the week of October 29th, 2019. We've talked a few times about how marketers are feeling about influencer marketing. Well, I talked. I can only assume you talk back to whatever you listen to podcasts on. But what are the influencers themselves thinking? After all, isn't what influencers think of such momentous importance that that's how they became influencers in the first place? Expensive ones? Social Media Today's Kristen Matthews checked in with several hundred of them and learned some things you might want to know. First, how do you achieve influencer status? Well, if you have 10 to 100,000 followers, that puts you in the running to be a mid-level influencer. You're no Kardashian, but you can charge $250 to $400 per blog post with full social shares that include Instagram. Kristen tends to think that's the sweet spot for brands because the blog posts stick around and is the gift that keeps on giving, while the social stuff gives you the shot of marketing adrenaline you roam the streets looking for. Here's something that super won't surprise you. When influencers are asked if they'll take product instead of money, 100% prefer the money. And they don't want commission deals either. They don't want to be held accountable for sales. They just want to be paid per post. A lot of controversy around influencer marketing has been about how these influencer brand relationships are made clear. Or not. Brands think content being labeled as an ad or sponsored hurts it. But the FTC says, we don't care. You have to disclose you paid these people off to make them say things. 95% of influencers do not think sponsored labels limit effectiveness, and their fans trust that they believe the product is awesome. I would say the same thing if I'm selling my influence. Okay, brands, listen up, because here's the survey result that gives you something actionable to do. About half of influencers actively look for and reach out to brands for partnerships. So, if you aren't providing some clear and easy way for them to reach you, you might be missing out on a beautiful relationship that might have been. It would have made for a good Tom Hanks, Meg Ryan movie back in the day. We haven't gotten quite to the point where I'm telling brands they've lost their minds and are sabotaging their companies by ignoring podcasts, but we're mighty close. It's quickly becoming a channel that's just silly to skip, like saying you aren't going to use social media. A couple of reports give us the latest insight. Westwood One says, yes, podcast listenership is growing solidly, but something's changing. More women. Compared to July of 2017, weekly female podcast listeners are spending 23% more time with podcasts. Weekly female podcast listeners have downloaded 13% more podcasts and listened to 15% more of them. But when it comes to going to a live podcast event, which is also happening, podcasts are driving ticket sales to live events, it's millennial males 18 to 34 who are mostly doing that. But they're willing to travel over 25 miles and pay an average $42 to see their favorites rock the mic. Are people listening on their voice assistants and smart speakers to podcasts? You know, not so much. Edison says although podcast listeners are 33% more likely to own one, podcast listening on them is about 18%. And while that number's growing, it's not growing much. Of course, as expected, the genius marketing world is already diligently working to screw up the benefits of podcasting by ignoring what the listeners want. They want ads to be live and genuine and read by the host they love. Screw 'em. The number of pre-produced, basically radio commercials, is going up. And IAB PwC reports usage of host-read ads is going down. Find out what the public wants, then don't do it. Madam President of Westwood One, Suzanne Crimes, says for advertisers, it's important to understand podcast ad preferences for the industry and listeners are at a crossroads. For some of us, Halloween isn't an especially scary time of year because we stay terrified all year round. But since it is a sorta holiday and it's on everybody's mind, Vandita Grover decided to find out for MarTech Advisor what scares CMOs and marketing leaders the most right now. What's keeping them up at night? What's keeping the old stomach acids churning? See if you identify with anything on this list. Armchair marketers, people constantly giving you uninformed, subjective opinions. Organizing marketing and sales internal processes. Approaching personalization with demographics instead of user intent. Measurement that puts too much emphasis on short-term outcomes. Quality management. Nobody manning chat systems and chat systems that aren't integrated with the CMS. No attribution tracking. We talked about that last week. No cohesive strategy to drive conversions or revenue. Balancing privacy and personalization. What to do with AI, AR, VR, and automation technology. No customer-centric culture. And a whacked-out social media strategy. See, you're not alone. Don't ever be caught alone. Content Marketing Institute and marketing profs, you know that Ann Handley lady, just put out their B2B benchmarks report for 2020, and it tells us most B2B marketers use content marketing pretty well for top-of-the-funnel stuff like brand awareness, audience education, and trust building. Hurrah for that! But deeper in the funnel, not so great. Which is a special shame because for B2B, that's the stuff that gets you what you want, which is a closed deal. They're struggling to build subscribed audiences, generate sales and revenue, and build loyalty with existing customers. Okay, probably most helpful to talk about what the high-performing B2B content marketers are doing. They have a documented content strategy. They operate as a centralized content marketing group that works throughout the organization. They have dedicated teams of at least 2 to 5. They prioritize their audience's needs over their organization's desired messaging. They craft content based on the stages of the customer journey. They amplify their content using non-owned channels like influencers, speaking engagements, guest posts. They do paid distribution. And they use metrics to evaluate performance and show ROI. Now, if you aren't doing any of those things or aren't doing them well, you just might be in the not high-performing category. And it's one reason you're losing your hair too early. Lastly and quickly, as a writer, boy, do I love me some words. Words are powerful. They mean things. They matter. However, I, and it turns out many of you, are not so impressed with buzzwords. Oh, we use the daylights out of them so we can sound smart in meetings, but inside we die a little every time we hear them or use them. Magnolia asked marketers to vote on the buzzwords they can't stand to hear. So here we go, counting down the top 10. Number 10, solo-mo, as in social, local, mobile. 9, advertainment. 8, growth hacking. 7, ecosystem. 6, actionable. Damn it, I think I used that one in this podcast. 5, snackable content. 4, low-hanging fruit, which can be delicious as snackable content. 3, paradigm shift. Whoa. 2, disruption. And the number one buzzword marketers are most fed up with, synergy at 32%. Magnolia's GM Darren Hitchcock said, "We're all guilty, and it's good to see marketers are happy to laugh at some of their own terminology, but there's a serious point to be made here." The serious point he's referring to being that we're supposedly in the clear communication business, yet we're out there doing a lot of not that. That's the Content Marketing Quickie for this week. Me making this podcast and you subscribing to it creates an awesome synergy that will enrich your ecosystem. So you come back and grab that low-hanging fruit next week.